Kia ora everyone, just welcome people as they join. Thank you for attending today. It's a pleasure to have such interest. I can just see that people are joining, so we'll wait a moment or two before, so that can settle down, and then we will start with the karakia. Okay, so Kirsten, can I invite you please to open the meeting?
Kia ora tātou. Ki te mihi kia koe hoki Rochelle. Mark, ko te mea nui, ko te aroha, nā reira, kei te tika ki te timata tēnei wāhanga kōrero i te karakia. Nā reira, me karakia tātou. Tihei Mauriora, ko Aotearoa tōku kāinga tūturu, ko tāne whakapiripiri tōku kāinga, ko te āhuru mōwai taku kāinga, e hara taku i te wharerahi, e hara taku i te whare whairawa. Ko ona whakarākei, ko ona whakaneko, ko te aroha, ko te whakapono me te rangi Māori. He kāinga whakatō kākano, hei whakatipu i ngā tōtara haimata, hei whakatipu i ngā reinga rangatira, hara mai te toki, haumie huie taiki. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks Kirsten. As I said, it's absolutely wonderful to be here today. I'm Rochelle. I am have been the principal investigator of this research study. I'm a woman in her 50s, we'll say lower 50s, with red hair, bright red glasses, and I'm wearing a blue top today. We haven't got a New Zealand Sign Language interpreter for this. There is captioning available, so if you would like to turn on captioning, that live captioning is available, and we will try and do our best to visually describe as much as possible throughout this webinar. We are looking at making all of these resources as accessible as possible over time, but today we wanted to make sure that we were able to share with those who were able to make it in the best way that we could, given the resources and timing. Today we're going to break it up in this event into two parts with a break in the middle, which is always a good thing, a 10-minute break. And so I've got an overview there to give you an idea of how that's going to go. Essentially, the first part, some gathering, welcoming, introductions. Some people are going to share about what home means to them, some live and some via video recording. I'm going to overview the research, and then just before we break at 1:50, there'll be some case studies of people talking about their housing experiences. Then we'll have a break, and we'll come back at 2 o'clock, so a 10-minute break, and we'll talk about how we've framed the recommendations that have come from this research. And then members of the co-production team, the disabled people that have been part of this research process with us, are going to share overview recommendations and some of their insights that they've gained through this project. We're hoping to be able to finish on time so that we've got 10 minutes for discussion and to respond to any questions before we finish with overviewing some resources and gathering all our thoughts together at the end. So a reminder, if you'd like to share any thoughts, ask any questions, or just raise any issues, feel free to use the Q&A function that's down the bottom of your Zoom screen, and that will come. We'll be able to see that. Now, I see some hands are going up as well, and I'm not sure who's got their hand up. I couldn't see who that was, but maybe Hadley, you could help with that, just give us a sense of what that's about. So you might not be able to see everybody here today, but hopefully you'll see them as we move in and out and as we make sounds. But essentially on the screen today, there's how many? 10 of us, including Hedley from AV Support, Jazz Jot, Rachel and Kirsten from the research team, the core research team on the screen. And we also have Christine, Diane, Kate, Beth and Peric here today. I know Maureen wanted to come, but she got a better offer because she's going to go and see the whales at Kaikoura. And there's other people who've had very good reasons for not coming. Yeah, there's apologies from a number of people as well. Okay, so what I want to do is just quickly run through the research teams, etc. Now, people will perhaps not like the screenshot that I captured of them, and Amanda might be the most cross because I've just taken some screenshots and put them all together to show you some of the people that have been involved in our in this work over the last 3 to 4 years. And it's just been so delightful and wonderful to get to know people, and I hope that you can see we've had fun, and it's been a great process to be part of. The co-production team haven't just been providing fun though. So what I'm sharing with you now is a graphic which shows the overall project, which I will talk through bit by bit in a moment. But within each of the different phases, we've highlighted the many ways that people from the co-production team have contributed to this work. This was hours and hours of work, for many hundreds of hours of work that was contributed to this project. And so I want to emphasize the value of the experience and the expertise provided by disabled people within this project, all of who were the housing experts. Us as the research team didn't know a lot about housing, and so it was fantastic to learn from this group of incredible people. And then the research team that sat around it, this was us at one of our meetings, where most of our meetings were online, but occasionally we got together. But give you a bit of a sense of all women. I'm not sure quite how that worked, but anyway, we were, and we did it well. We did good woman stuff well. I think the first meeting we had, we cried all the time, just because we were sharing so deeply. But the research team is hosted by the University of Otago, this project, but it was researchers from Massey, Wellington and AUT that collaborated. So in terms of Victoria University, Kirsten and Leslie were involved. In terms of Massey, we had Anna Brown and Faye O'Sullivan involved. In terms of AUT, Nick Hayes, and then us at the University of Otago, Jean, a colleague of mine, who's been a key support person, and then Jazz Jot, Rachel, Susan and Faye, sorry, not Faye, she was with Massey, Jazz Jot, Rachel, Susan, who were all part of the University of Otago team. I can't go by without recognising and acknowledging the conceptualisation and advisory support of Kate and Te Marama as well, though. When I was working alongside them as colleagues, they were formative in developing this whole research project, and so without them guiding and offering advice, I don't think I would have got the funding in the first instance. So I really want to recognise them. And a few other people. This has been a team effort. It's been a bit of a village. We've had 2 advisory groups, one around housing and one around policy, and how we might include disabled people's voices in policy. And so about 10 people on those advisory groups. Rahira, Raymana and Maria all supported with huge amounts of supportive time and expertise around New Zealand Sign Language translation, Te Reo Māori and easy to understand material support. So we're really grateful for them. And finally, I want to mention this project started when I was also working at the Burwood Academy Trust, and there is a number of staff who also worked on this project as part of the Burwood Academy: Joe, Angelo, Katerina, Olivia, and Tina. So it's been a big group, and it's been fantastic to have everyone involved. We're going to start by inviting people to talk about what home means to them because we think this sets the stage really beautifully. So the first thing I would firstly, I would love to invite Kate. Kate, to unmute yourself and give us an overview in 3 to 5 minutes of what home means for you.
As most of us through this process, it's been as much a learning about what home means as about having my voice heard. One of the things about home is that it should be ideally somewhere safe, because when we're safe, then we can we're able to participate fully in life. When we're not safe, then we spend so much time having to protect ourselves that we cease to be able to contribute in the ways that we necessarily want to. So, my biggest thing about wanting to participate in this is living in Christchurch. So Christchurch post-earthquake, the initial vision was that Christchurch would become the most disabled friendly place in the country. That hasn't happened. In fact, we have moved so far away from that ideal that actually it is quite remarkable. Today we went out and in our local neighbourhood, and I had to get out of my wheelchair to be able to get places because there wasn't access. So I'm very grateful that I have a place where I can have my pets, I can have access to the things that I need to actually be able to function well in life. So for me, home is about being a place that meets my needs. And one of the problems is everyone else has an opinion about what my needs are, including my husband. And actually, it's important that home is about being heard more than it is about, that's the first most important point, is actually being listened to, being heard, and then being flexible in helping to make an environment not as disabled, as non-disabling as possible. Because actually, when we live in a disabling society, then we're excluded from living well. So don't know if
Wonderful.
that's helpful or not, but there we are.
It is fantastic. Thank you, Kate. We really appreciate that. Naz preferred to pre-record something, so I'm now going to share her video. And Rachel has interviewed Naz, so you will see Naz and Rachel on the screen.
Hello everyone, kia ora. I'm here talking to Naz today. I'm Rachel Hazelden, one of the researchers on the Flourishing Together project, and it's been wonderful working with Naz for a couple of years. And we've asked you to speak today, Naz, about what home means to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, home means to me so much more than just a place to live. It's where it can exist without constant struggle. And as a disabled person and someone with osteogenesis imperfecta, very long word, the world outside can feel unpredictable and sometimes even dangerous. But at home, I don't have to worry about breaking a bone just from opening a kitchen door, or navigating a space not built with my needs in mind. Home is designed with ease and safety at its core. Everything is accessible, within reach, and adapted to support my independence. It's the one place where I feel the least disabled. not because my condition disappears, but because the barriers do. Home gives me the freedom to be myself without fear or discomfort, and it's where I feel most safe, most at peace, and most like me. It's the space where I can rest, recharge, and just live comfortably on my own terms. That's what home means to me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Naz.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Naz. We've now got some quotes that came from the survey, which is one part of the research project, which we'll hear about in a little bit more detail. And so we thought we'd bring in just 3 quotes. There's so many to pick from. So Rachel will read one, I'll read the next, and then Rachel will read the third.
Thank you. Home is the heart of every whānau, where we come together to replenish aroha, manaakitanga, and be reminded of our tūranga waiwai in Aotearoa. Our whare should be one that is safe, nurturing, and filled with laughter, fun, and aroha. It needs to adapt to the needs of the whānau.
Home for me is a place where I feel safe to be me and who I really am. It allows me to have a space for funded services to be enabled to come and support my daily living needs without disruption from the unplanned needs of others, as I mostly choose to live alone or with people that I choose to share my space with, rather than be forced to accommodate the needs and wishes of strangers that I'm forced to share costs with. Having a home also means stability and certainty around where I will wake up tomorrow and who will be there to support me, without the fear of needing to compromise my needs and wants to better suit others, and having to feel undervalued as a human because my home situation is not my own.
Home is somewhere that feels safe, comfortable, certain, consistent, autonomous, reflective of me and my values and interests, and is enduring enough that I can build a lifestyle from and a community around. Somewhere I could invite others either to visit or more intimately into my life and be well resourced enough to show manaakitanga and to feel safe, secure and proud. Somewhere I could trust I could safely and successfully raise a family. Somewhere I couldn't be asked to leave so someone else could use my home for another purpose.
Thanks, Rachel. Those are just a little wee snapshot of the things that are important to people. We got a lot of responses as people shared about how home was important to them. And we're looking for ways to share all of those responses so that everyone can hear the importance of home for everyone, but particularly in this case for people who experience disability in their families. Amazingly, we're running well ahead of schedule. So this means that I won't need to rush this bit so much. And hopefully you'll have some time to sort of take on board the research and what it was about. Can I just remind you that if you've got any questions at all, any comments, any thoughts, pop them into the Q&A question box down the bottom, and those of us on the panel will be keeping an eye on those, and we'll certainly be responding to them later in the session. So this is a brief overview of the research project, what we did and why we did it. I'm going to start with why we did it. Essentially, we've all heard a lot of disabled people say, I wasn't consulted about a policy decision or a practice, or if they were consulted, they say it felt really tokenistic. All right. We've also heard I've also heard policy people say, and my daughter worked as a policy advisor and talked about the challenges that she had of doing consultation well in a way that did allow people's voices to come through. And certainly getting the information from the communities, such as a disabled persons community, in a way that was usable for them as policy people. So this whole process was about, the project was about trying to bridge that gap and think about whether we could bring together the knowledge already held within the disability community, their knowledge of housing, and bring it so that it was more easily accessed, could be more easily accessed and used by policy people. So that's what the whole project was about. And we recognise that disabled people have their own lived experience, and that might be their experience of disability, but it's also their experience of the disability system. And also for many, the expertise that they have. Expertise from advocating for a long time, expertise from their work, the places that they have professional skills in. And so people bring all of those different facets of lived experience to build this bridge. So how did we go about building the bridge? As I've kind of alluded to, we had two key purposes for this research. One was that we wanted to partner, this is a key bit, partner with disabled people and tangata whaikaha Māori. Well, this is a journey we wanted to go on together. It was very much about how could we try and solve this issue together. The first one was around how do we include disabled people's voices in policy discussions. And so we wanted to try a couple of tools that we thought might be helpful. And I'll tell you about those in a moment. And then as a research team, we didn't start with housing as the focus, but in conversation with disabled people and tangata whaikaha Māori, they said, please, could the policy that we're talking about together be around kāinga, housing and home, because it's one of our largest concerns. So that's why that particular topic was chosen to guide our discussions. And the more we got into it, the more the question focused down on how disabled people and tangata whaikaha Māori can experience choice and control in how and where they live over their lives. So coming back to our bridge building thing, just to emphasise that we tried a couple of tools, which I will talk to you about, personal experiences from a survey and findings from a literature review. And then we used, alongside disabled people and their experiences, we together have prioritised some key barriers that seem to impact choice and control around housing. And we have come up with some recommendations. I want to emphasise that we never intended to be policy experts, and we never intended to write the policy. All right, that's them, they can do that. But what we wanted to do was start to bring the knowledge towards the centre a bit, so that it was easier for policy advisors to be able to use the knowledge. So I talked to you a little bit earlier about the different ways that disabled people have been involved across the project. And this now is the same image, the same figure, but we've just put in the different phases that is part of this research project, and I'll go through it bit by bit. I'll visually describe it a little bit just to give some sense. So it's a purple, blue and green image. Along the top and the bottom are two purple strips that outline the two objectives. So along the top is objective 1, developing co-production methods and tools, and along the bottom is objective 2, emerging and refining theories about kāinga, housing and home. And then between those two strips, there's a series of shapes which represent the different phases. And I'll now talk through those bit by bit so we can go through it slowly. So the section that's now highlighted is whakawhanaungatanga and forming the co-production team. And this was a really important part. We wanted to work well together. We wanted to make sure we were clear about the values that guided this research. We wanted to spend a lot of time ensuring that the processes that we use to work together were mana enhancing, that supported people's ability to express ideas, to offer in a different opinion, and to really feel safe to contribute. Then this group of the co-production team. So across the project, we've had about 40 people involved in the co-production team, not the same 40 all the time. So we've described it a bit like a sushi train. We keep putting the sushi out on the train and it keeps going round and round, and people come and take what they're able to, depending on what they've got space for, time for, the energy for, etc., interest in. So in this first phase, there was about 15 people who together sort of described or articulated really what home meant to them and what were the things that impacted on their ability to achieve a home that worked for them. And so from that, what we call generated some theory around that. And you'll see we've used a jigsaw tool house to sort of summarize that, which you'll see in a moment. Then we spent quite a lot of time designing the tools, co-designing those two methods that we wanted to try. So the first was a survey tool. So we needed to find a survey tool that was accessible, and we needed to design the content. And then we also needed to design how we were going to review literature together and how we were going to make sure people could access the literature, how they're able to engage with it, and then how we were able to bring knowledge together. So that led to, firstly, the first phase was the qualitative survey. And I've got a slide here just to remind you, some of you might have seen the survey. This is just a screenshot from the survey. The survey platform is Accessible Surveys. I've got the link down the bottom here. I'm happy to share the slides with all participants at the end. So yeah, essentially the survey it's an accessible platform, and as you can see, we had a series of questions down the side, mainly focused on unpacking that. To what extent was the theory that we developed in the phase one, was it true for a wider group of people? So we were just trying to understand whether that was what we found was relevant. Then we did the literature review, which was with just the co-production team. So 134 people completed the survey. The literature review again was with a co-production team of around 10 people for this phase. But actually it grew a little bit. So we had people coming in and out, more people involved with the survey in terms from the co-production team. So the literature review, to show you, we looked at about 22 different documents of different types, and we asked questions of the documents like, what was the intervention that was tried? Who was the target audience? What were the reasons for trying the intervention in the first place? Did it succeed? Who benefited the most? And what influenced whether that intervention what influenced its effectiveness for enhancing choice and control? So basically, people were bringing their own experience of disability, their experience of disability systems, and their professional expertise to make sense of what had been published already and to bring their lens and their unique perspective to the data. Then we had to co-develop a plan for how we were going to share the knowledge, which was really fun. So we, obviously boring things like write reports and policy briefs and things, but we also had, let's do a creative dance, let's do a drama, let's go on a roadshow. So we have had all sorts of cool ideas coming up, and we'll keep working on those. We'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. And so we're now at the stage of sharing the knowledge in a range of ways. As I mentioned, we had a bit of a theory about the sorts of things that influence choice and control, and this jigsaw house is the sort of summary of it. And so we're going to go into getting people to share some cases from people, sharing about their own housing experiences. But just to summarize before they start, and just checking, Perrick, you're happy to go first in about 1 minute? Cool. So people said the way things work, the processes, how things are done really impacted whether they could experience choice and control. Then they also talked about entitlements or options and knowing where things are up to. What am I entitled to? What, is what I am entitled to suitable for my needs? That also influences their choices and control around our housing and home. Navigation support and whether they could access that, whether they could get help to manage like a building modification process or a move to a new location, to a new home. Those sorts of things influenced their choice and control. People talked about funding and housing related funding entitlements particularly. So there was some overlap with some of these ones. Urban planning, building codes and tenancy rights. So to what extent do the rules around where houses can be built and how houses can be built and what sort of amenities need to be around houses in terms of access and driveways and things, and also tenancy rights. How do the rules around a good rental property impact on people's choices about where they could live? And then the final two were the behaviour and actions of others. So that's partly about attitudes and assumptions and expectations within society, but also within the agencies and groups that they're needing to engage with as they look at housing options. And then the last one was financial security. So having enough money. And people said, well, I don't get any choice. I haven't got money. My choices are really, really limited. And so financial security as a whole was also considered. So we thought it would be useful and helpful for you to hear, with this theory in mind, to hear some different people's experiences. And so we're going to start, I'm going to stop sharing, and Perik, if you want to introduce yourself, unmute yourself, and then tell us about your experiences.
Good afternoon all, thank you for having me along. I was born in France and I've lived in 4 countries before electing Aotearoa as my home, and never regretted it one day since I've been here, and I've been here 30 years now. So yeah, so it's been a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to and my participation comes from well, the fact that first of all I'm disabled, polio at a young age, and while it may sound like I'm criticizing, I am more like critiquing in a positive way, saying, look, we have little issues here, it would be nice to improve them, not to actually demolish a system which is already incredibly good for disabled people. And I come from the perspective of having lived in 4 different countries. I think everything I say should be seen or heard in that perspective. There's always in the back of my mind a comparison between New Zealand and other countries, and we are doing well. We just need to do that little bit better, I think. So, so what I did is I went through that house, that jigsaw house, bit by bit, very methodically. I work in IT after all, so that's what we do in IT. We work methodically. And I started with the first thing, which is a question of language. I think I understand that this whole research was around the disability sector or community and housing. And we come inevitably to the word accessibility. What I need to make sure for those panelists or those people who are attending from government agencies is that accessibility is not exclusive to disability. They're not synonymous. In fact, stats seem to indicate that difference. In 2024, 17% of New Zealanders classify themselves as disabled people, but 25% of New Zealanders were in need of accessible housing and accessible buildings in one way or another. Because in accessibility, we need to include a simple parent with a pram or a push chair, injured people, temporarily injured people, and of course our elderly population, to which I also belong, by the way. So accessibility is a wider issue than we think. So that's for the language. And now let's go into the house. And the house starts with ways of working, how things are done. Well, from my perspective, having a background in IT, it hasn't been too difficult to seek out on the web where to find agencies and where to, and I know how to ask questions. However, I am a minority. Not everyone lives in the IT world like I do. Not everyone has a facility to go on the web and seek out the proper websites and so on, or even ask the questions. There's terminology in the sector that needs to be used. If the wrong terminology is used, the wrong information will be provided. So I think there needs to be some improvement there, probably something of a centralized system whereby members of the disabled community can go to and have all the information there, right, and in day-to-day English language, not in whatever jargon. Funding. Well, the one thing I have to start with that one is from my perspective, the current funding system just doesn't match the housing reality. And I'll take my example here, where I've been fortunate to be able to have some cash or to put some cash aside. Well, it didn't take much to realize that that was a big mistake. I should have stayed indigent, because then the system might have listened to me. But just because I was being a bit proactive and saved some cash, not enough to buy, but enough to be comfortable to live, then I was penalized. Okay, you've got some cash, which means you can go and live in a motel because we're not going to pay you or help you with anything, okay, until you spend all the cash. So basically, the idea is that the funding just, there's a big hole in there somewhere, okay, because I can't afford to buy, but at the same time, I'm classified as this sort of very comfortable middle-class person who should be able to live comfortably. Well, how's that going to happen? So there is a gap there. And I think that I wouldn't be the only one to fall into that crack. The other thing about funding is when you rent, you're also at the mercy of your landlord. And I mean the mercy. Some landlords, and I've been through that, will not accept their home or their house, property, whatever it is, to be modified with accessibility things. We don't want any bars in the bathroom. We don't want that ramp in front of the house. We don't want this. We don't want that. So eventually, even if we have the funding, it's not going to work, because if you rent a property, you have to have the agreement of the landlord. And if the landlord says, nah, sorry, not going to happen because we don't want that stuff, it's stuck, which is exactly what happened to me. I had to move out. So there's, again, another crack there that needs to be looked at. Entitlements, options, and where things are up to. Well, I didn't know what to say there, so I kind of put a thing which is out of personal research. Now, roughly, basically, I should include that in the next one, which is urban planning, building codes, and tenancy right. Okay, all that thing. Now, we are in a situation now where government has offered no incentive to builders and building developers of private dwellings to build accessibility houses. So naturally, because they cost a bit more money, it's not happening. Okay, there's very precious little thing on the market, and it will be mostly probably housing corporation, which is a kind of scheme in at the moment, which will have some level of accessibility in houses, but otherwise, the private sector itself has very little, if nothing, that's accessible. The current building code, which is from the Building Act 2004, makes zero, not a tiny bit, zero provision for private dwelling. It's all commercial dwellings, nothing for the private sector. So in effect, what we see now is a sad reality where we've got all these builds being done everywhere, which is really good. We are building for people. We are building for young, fully valid people, not for the future. So yeah, I'll go back to that part this afternoon or later on. And also in terms of tenancy rights, the tenancy system at the moment, the whatever act or is grossly lacking, because basically there is again no security, and I think that it was Kate who mentioned it. There's zero security from the perspective of the tenant. I mean, now on top of it, we have this no justification expulsion, something like that has come in place, which means that you know, I've eventually, the theory is I've eventually found a place where I can live, where I can get in with my wheelchair and be safe when I take a shower. And then suddenly I receive a note from the landlord saying, "Look, I'm sorry, but you know, you have to leave." Why? I don't have to give you any reason. Go away. You've got 3 months to find another property, and that's it. Now, by the way, the property where I'm in at the moment, the waiting list was over 2 years, and that's a private scheme. So 3 months is hardly enough. So moving along, navigation support or help to manage projects. Again, it hasn't been too hard for me, but I reiterate the fact that I'm pretty good at seeking information. So it's you know, it would be nice again to have that centralized website where all this stuff regarding housing can be easily accessible. The behaviors and actions of others. Well, I did mention the landlord. I mean, it's you know, I mean, I'm not saying all landlords are like that, and I'm not saying this landlord was particularly bad. He just had an idea about his property, saying, "Look, this is not going to happen. Okay, no way, forget it, go away." But he wasn't particularly mean. He wasn't particularly nice. That's just what happened. And so that's something to bring in mind in the rental sector, or the private rental sector. It's a problem. It's a problem, and it has to be mentioned. And finally, the last one, financial security. Well, joins back what I was saying about the funding earlier on. There's a huge gap here again, because if I hadn't that spare cash on the side from working, I would simply not be able to rent privately. I would be automatically in need of a subsidized house or accommodation. So again, there's a disconnect here between the private rental situation and the income needed to access that. So,
Thank you,
that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Pierrick.
I don't have, yep.
No, that's fantastic. So what we're now going to do is hear from Rachel and Hannah. Now, Hannah, I'll share the screen so you can see the photo of Hannah. Had much more exciting things to do today, and Rachel was working, and so they sent something along for Rachel Hazeldine to read out. So Rachel's going to read out the words provided by Rachel.
Wonderful. So Rachel starts this with, our wonderful news is that Hannah, aged 23 with Down syndrome, has just been accepted into a flat. Our story with Hannah going flatting has been that when Hannah left school at the end of 2021, we wanted to get her settled into routine and day-to-day activities and potentially work before embarking on moving out of home. About 18 months ago, Hannah was settled and happy in her activities and had a part-time job. She was into a really good independent routine of catching taxis, making her own lunch, and being able to access the house if no one was home. We started to look into flatting and approached friends who were setting up a flat for their daughter, but they already had enough flatmates. We also approached another friend who was looking for a flatmate for her daughter, but this was not the right fit for Hannah. We approached Hohepa about a year ago and put Hannah's name down on the waiting list for independent housing, but there was no availability. I also contacted CRC, Christchurch Residential Care, and they emailed me back, but I have not pursued that any further as another option arose. A friend of mine told me about her daughter's flat needing another flatmate. They advertised quite widely for a new flatmate, and Hannah went for a few visits and was offered the room. The process of finding a flat for Hannah has not been easy and has been very reliant on if an opportunity came up, as opposed to an organised system. It feels like it is just a bit of good luck. The house Hannah is moving into is lovely and purpose-built, so it has a room for support staff to stay. It is in a quiet residential area near to a bus stop. It's about 20 minutes drive from us. When we first let Lifelinks and Enabling Good Lives know that we were in the process of finding Hannah a flat, they were positive and said to me, for me to let them know when she got a flat and that additional funding could be applied for. I contacted Lifelinks when we started the process of getting into this flat and was told that due to budget constraints, they cannot incur an increase in support package funding. This was very disappointing to hear, as we'd been told all along that once Hannah had a spot in a flat, then we could reapply for funding and that would be supported. It has been very challenging to find the right flat for Hannah and for it all to possibly fall over due to budget constraints is very frustrating. Luckily, Hannah does not have enough funding in her package. So I'm just double checking that. Luckily, she does have enough funding in her package to cater for her to go into flatting until her review date in November. Hannah's desperately keen to go flatting, and there's been unnecessary obstacles in the way, such as not having a clear system for housing and flatting situations for people with disabilities. Also, there should be an independent living supported living package through Lifelinks that all people who are wanting to go flatting should be able to apply for. It is wonderful that Hannah is able to flat with her friends, but the process and the road to this has not been easy or straightforward one. Thanks from Rachel and Hannah. Thank you.
So really fantastic news for Hannah. I've already been invited to take her out to McDonald's and go to see her new flat with her, so I'm looking forward to that. I just wanted to share, we were 1 minute over into the break, but I've just got one last, this is a quote from a survey, some survey responses, and it just highlights some other different people's aspects of people's housing. So this response was from a parent of a middle-aged woman who'd had a head injury when she was a child. So she uses a power wheelchair and requires 24-hour support. When she talks about ways of working, she says our experience is mostly with ACC, but because their processes are so convoluted and invasive, requiring disclosure of deeply personal information, we avoid them where possible. She talks about this in quite some detail, talks about the challenges they've had when they weren't able to access a case manager, and now that they have re-got a case manager again, how much better that is. She says, but there is always an expert between us, what we know we need and them who will provide it. The smallest thing seems to waste funds paying someone to come, write a report and recommendation, and usually agreeing with what we thought anyway. Sometimes they surprise us. I think retaining case managers who get to know clients and allowing them more flexibility to make decisions without expert reports would streamline and save funds, especially for long-term clients. In terms of entitlements, there's one sentence that I'd love to share. I would really like to set my daughter up in a supportive community before I die, but I don't know of any supportive community, and nor do I know who could help with that. She talks about urban planning and how she would love to see these places that make them rich, vibrant communities. And the challenges of building code requirements, and not having any building code requirements for disability, and issues with landlords. Talked about the value of finding an architect and how difficult that was. They had 5 different architects before they found one. We had trouble finding an architect who could listen to what we needed, who was willing to spend a day navigating our existing house in a wheelchair to learn what did not work. And then in terms of financial security, she talks about this is the single biggest consideration. Once we had some money, we were able to get housing that worked by building it ourselves. When we rented, it was an absolute nightmare of mold, cold, stairs, insecurity, and poverty. So we're going to stop now for a break. So we've got 6 minutes for the break, and we'll rejoin again at 2 p.m. To move on to the second part of the afternoon. So we'll look forward to seeing you all soon. Hit the 2 o'clock mark, and I see the sun's really come out. I'll just pull that down so I haven't got the sun right in my eyes. Lovely to have everyone back, and what powerful stories that people have shared about the value of home, and I think we can all speaks to our own hearts in some ways, doesn't it? About the things that we value about home, and how important it is to advocate for this for everyone. Yeah, so thank you to all those that have shared so far. In the second half, we're going to move a little bit more into recommendations, but I just want to emphasise on the back of our conversations already and our listenings already that and want to endorse that the experience and expertise of disabled people should be routinely included in all housing policy planning processes. As Perrick said, accessibility isn't just about a disability issue. Actually, accessibility is for all, and the perspectives that disabled people and community can bring will really enhance the policies and practices that meet the needs of everyone. As one of our co-production team members said, everyone's going to need some wheels at some point in their life. So let's build for wheels that we can get in and out of a house easily. So I'm just now going to frame up a little bit around how we've framed up the recommendations. Essentially, when we started this process, we were really aware it's very overwhelming. It's like, oh, what are we going to do? It's so, this is really complex, it's big, and it can feel like this massive circle of concern of things that we don't have any control over. And so we leaned into the circles of control, influence, and concern. I think Stephen Covey was the first one who talked about these, or popularized them anyway. And we all thought about what we can directly control or impact through our thoughts, words, and actions. So the things we do have control over, the things that we can do something about, that we can influence. We can't necessarily control the outcome, but we can influence it, and that might be through advocacy or asking for changes to be made, etc. And then there's things that we can't do. And then, so we've kind of used this whole metaphor the whole way through. What can we control? What can we influence? And when we looked at this whole big complex housing system and thought, it's so overwhelming, what we wanted our recommendations to be framed around is that every person in every organisation within this complex system has some ability to have some influence or exert some control. And so when we were framing up the recommendations, we were thinking about framing them up around some key sort of groupings. Now, there's lots of ways you could have grouped within the housing system. It's complex. But these are the groupings that we've kind of framed the recommendations around. So firstly, disabled people in whānau said, we want to have control, we want to have influence, so make sure we're front and centre. This is something that we want to be able to be involved with. And you'll hear in the following bits different ways that people have sought to have some control and exert some control. But we've got some recommendations that they're aimed at disabled people in whānau. Then we developed some that were aimed at disability advocacy and support groups. So ways that they might be able to influence or control different aspects of the housing system. We talked about, I'll head over to the housing market. We don't like the phrase, but the market is kind of the way it's thought about. So how money is made, the economic system that underpins houses, how houses are built, how houses are bought and sold, and how rentals happen, but particularly the buying and selling of houses. And there's things that could happen in that space, the building of houses. Then there are the housing providers, and by this we were meaning more the rental properties, and particularly kāinga ora, other social housing providers, community housing providers, and private landlords. We've already heard quite a lot of talking about issues around tenancy rules for disabled people and security of tenancy. So that was sort of leaning into that a little bit. Local government is kind of, even though I see today there's the central government is going to start telling local government what they can do and can't do around housing, and and they will step in if it isn't financially advantageous. Local government does have an influence on how the rules are applied. All right, and so there were some recommendations aimed at them. Central government are the legislators. They're the ones that make the laws. They also, though, set the tone of the conversation. They set the policy agenda, and they set the what's prioritised in this current period. So there's recommendations there, along with the agencies that act on their behalf. And have processes to enact their laws, their rules, their legislation. So that might be ACC, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of Health, etc. And then finally, we didn't want to leave out that there's this large societal things that impact on people's choice and control. We heard about that in terms of attitudes and assumptions. And so we've also got recommendations around influencing societal attitudes and assumptions. So over the next little bit, you're going to hear again some different people, some speaking live, some recordings, talking about some of the recommendations that we've come up with, and talking to them. We do want to emphasise that the system thinking approach is required, and so what you're hearing today is a little snapshot, And the other materials that are coming will provide more nuance to that and provide some further challenge areas that you might want to consider. But certainly we need a systems thinking approach. And the other thing we want to emphasize, and it's been sort of core to all of our work, is work by the workshop and narratives for change. And that is really important for long-term change to happen. We need to be changing public mindsets. We need to change the expectations people have about what is possible for disabled people, or what is acceptable, what is considered the norm, the business as usual. And so a lot of what we've heard today has been about narratives, storytelling, wanting people to hear people's experiences for the purpose of changing mindset, which we then think leads to downstream responses in those other systems levels. So I shall stop talking, and I'm going to first hand over to Beth. And Beth, I'll let you introduce yourself. And Beth's going to speak for 5 minutes around we have picked some of these areas. We're not going to speak to all of them today, but Beth's going to speak about local government to start with. So Beth, I shall leave it to you.
Kia ora, my name's Beth. I am wearing a dark coloured dress with space cats on it because I am very fond of cats. I offered to come and talk here today about local government, or because I have a bit of experience, both personal and professional. So there's a little bit of background. I have a building science degree and master's in building science and architecture, and I do a little bit of work as an accessibility consultant in my time that I'm able to do work, but I'm also not capable of doing a huge amount of work. I've been through this process. We built a house for me under my parents' house, so had to get consents and everything. So that was a bit of a joy. But even though I don't have a physical disability, being part of the disability community meant that it was really important to me when we were doing that process to actually build an accessible apartment, because it was on the ground floor, and why not? And you know what? Turns out it's not actually that hard. So the more that we could just do it, the easier it would be, right? So when we talk about building codes, obviously building codes themselves are set by the central government, but it's the councils are the ones that kind of implement them. And there's this kind of weird relationship between the two that are a bit hard to kind of split apart. But when we talk about wanting more accessible housing, you could kind of think central government kind of has to be the stick a little bit. They have to, in an ideal world, we would have legislation that means that so many houses are accessible, and that would be great. But local councils also have a role in that they can also kind of be the carrot, because we actually do have some examples in New Zealand of councils who can incentivize accessibility. So instead of saying you have to build it, councils can turn around and say, we would like more accessible housing, so we are going to make the consenting process easier. For example, one really good example is up in Thames District Council. They have a program where if people want to build a LifeMark rated house, I think they get to increase the land coverage of land from 35% to 40% without needing a resource consent. So that saves money. It also means the house can be slightly bigger to allow for the accessibility. And almost half of all residential new builds in Thames are now designed to accessible standards, and most of them are exceeding the minimums as well, because the minimum was 3-star LifeMark and most of them are 4. So there are options, right? So councils do have a place in local government, has a place in being able to kind of encourage accessible housing in through those processes. There's also one thing, it kind of crosses, this is where my professional kind of comes in and crosses over into a few things, and that councils, when they're assessing their consents, are assessing them against standards, and the standards are set by the by central government. Obviously, they're developed through MB, I believe. Standards New Zealand is a part of MB, and the current standards that are developed don't automatically have accessible options in them as a standard option. If you want to build accessible, you kind of have to get the council to agree for you to do something slightly different than normal. And if we normalized, like for example, when we built my house, it has a level entry sliding door. So one reason that building level entry is hard is that part of the building code also says, well, we have to make sure that water doesn't get into our houses. So there has to be a lip into houses. When we create level entry, we dip that lip down beneath. So the ground kind of comes here and then there's a dip and then the rest of the floor. In most houses, it'll look like this, but you can build it and have a drain. But that's not standard. And as soon as it's not standard, it's harder for the councils to say yes to. So it's kind of this complex way of things working. But absolutely, I think from a perspective of how we could get more accessible housing, certainly there are things that we could be encouraging our local councils to be doing to encourage accessible housing for both private and developers, by saying, hey, if you want to build more, if you build accessible housing, we're going to give you a cheaper consent, or we're going to change some of the processes, or you wouldn't require a resource. And that again creates an incentive, as opposed to necessarily, we often talk about enforcing accessibility, whereas councils probably have the option to encourage it. So yes.
Beth, you're fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's as you can all hear, we've been so fortunate to have people with professional expertise alongside lived experience on this in this research project, and we're very grateful for that. Beth, thank you so much for sharing. Pierrick is now going to come back and just talk briefly around home builders. And by this, we're talking about developers, builders, architects, and some of the recommendations and things to think about from that perspective. Thanks, Pierrick.
Thank you, Rochelle. Okay, I'll take a stance from a legal point of view, and I think Beth made very good points there, but also an observational thing. I've been scouting as much as I can the current building situation in Christchurch. So we've got lots of housing going on in Christchurch, which is really good. And I'll give you some examples of what I've been able to observe. The front entrance of a lot of those builds have steps, and they lead directly onto the sidewalk, meaning that if try and build a ramp there, I don't know how that would be possible. The back entrance leads to an enclosed patio, a wee garden, which is really good, but there's no exit from there. There's no egress. So that means that if you can't put a ramp in the front door and you can't get out from the back door, you kind of, yeah, okay. The doors are narrow as they can be, yet fitting the building code, but narrow. So that means that for someone in a walker and wheelchair, those doors will get damaged. The floor plans are incredibly cramped because we want to build as many townhouses on a little section as we can. So that means that those floor plans are completely unsuitable for walkers or wheelchairs. The kitchens have out-of-reach appliances. We're talking about the cavity for the microwave is way too high. The fridge, the enclosure for the fridge is means that you have to think very carefully what kind of fridge you're going to put in there, because everything might be too high in there and so on. The taps are out of reach. The bench top is too high. The sink is way too low, so you can't get in. Toilets and bathrooms tend to be on the first floor. Not very practical if you're in a wheelchair. The staircases are too narrow, which means that even in the future, if you want to put a stair lift, it's going to be a problem. And But the railings in staircases are not safe. They're more decorative railings than actual railings you can rely on, because from a disabled perspective, if you really want to grab that rail and hold on to it for your dear life, that thing's going to come off the wall, basically. The last one is that the internal partitioning in these houses is way too thin and not built to support in the future, to support grab handles, stair lifts, and that sort of stuff. You need special reinforcement within the walls for such devices, and unfortunately, so basically we are building with no future in mind. And that's a really tragic situation. And I think Beth made a point. Okay, so can we incentivize councils like the Christchurch City Council to build accessible? Well, yes, it would be nice. The reality is that this is not being done, and we are building incredibly fast, and you know. The other thing is as well is that I've noticed is that in New Zealand, compared to other countries I've lived in, we build for an incredibly short period of time. Our builds are not meant to last. And that, unfortunately, reflects in the quality of the build. Why build well when it's not going to have to last anyway? So some of our builds age very, very badly, and that's I mean the ongoing cost of such a policy are just staggering. You know, I fail to understand here what's going on. So yeah, and I think that again, I think someone mentioned the accessibility, the New Zealand standard. There's then a really interesting document, the New Zealand standards for building accessibility features in a dwelling. They're actually quite loose. They've got some really incredibly precise measurements, and some other measurements are just completely omitted. And so I live in a house, for example, where such an example. So the standards say the appliances have to be accessible, reachable. What does that mean, reachable? So unless you're actually sitting with your architect and saying, yeah, you're 6'4", you can reach the microwave up there. I'm in a wheelchair. This ain't going to happen for me. So the concept of reachable is kind of fine wide. So although we have standards, the standards are very loose in that regard, and in other regards are incredibly strict. So I think from a building point of view, I put myself in the place of a builder, and I'm thinking, too hard here. Somebody's going to say, nah, it's not good enough, and I'm going to spend a lot of money rebuilding something which I thought was good in the first place. So yeah. So I think that's basically. I don't know if I've got the 5 minutes. But
yeah, no, that's great, Pierrick. Thank you very, very much. It's really good to hear the practical things in a home that are within the control and influence of builders as they build, and architects as they design, to make sure that homes are taking these really simple things into consideration from the outset of builds. Yeah. Fantastic. So the next area we're going to move on to is central government, and that's, as we've talked about, the legislators. We're also thinking about equity of access and flexibility of funding. And Christine, who's provided a tremendous amount of support to the research team across the project, has elected to pre-record a video talking about some of these points. So I'll get that video playing now. And you can watch Christine talking.
Tēnā koutou katoa ko Christine Aho. Hi, I'm Christine, and I've had the privilege of being part of the Flourishing Together project. So I'm going to present some topics from the Flourishing Together project that really stood out to me. I'll be providing some key information from survey participants in a summarised way. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've got a bit of a script, so you'll see me reading off the script. So here we go. So firstly, survey respondents spoke strongly about what home means to them. The home was seen as a place where people feel secure, a sense of well-being and belonging, where people can be themselves, connected and participate in the community. So I've got a quote here: home is more than bricks and mortar. It is accessible and I'm able to have family and friends over. So home is more than a house, and inclusive policies and procedures need to consider more than just the physical aspects of a building. So housing is a key determinant of health and must be prioritised as a fundamental right. Housing needs to be considered more holistically. So rather than focusing on physical accessibility, policies and practices must also consider how housing enables disabled people to feel connected to home, safe and secure, allowing them to belong, participate and express themselves. So this means that policies and practices need to consider, for example, ways to improve security of rental tenure, provide accessible information to support decision making, and fund supports and services that attend to the collective, e.g. the whānau, needs and preferences. And this topic leads on to the next topic, a proactive approach in considering how disabled people live in their house across time. There is a need to develop policies and practices that address how disabled people and their whānau live across time as the context of health conditions change or as they age. So disability housing related funding systems and processes are not designed to adapt to evolving needs over time. Current practices typically address present need instead of taking a proactive approach for future-orientated strategies. Low income and prolonged financial instability significantly affect disabled individuals' ability to secure and maintain a suitable home for themselves and their whānau. So we found some participants spoke of needing to rely on family financial assistance. For other people without whānau support, options were very limited. Disabled people spoke of financial insecurity affecting home maintenance and necessary modifications critical to accommodate to evolving needs of the whānau, which in turn directly affects health and well-being. So again, a holistic or wider concept of thought is needed to address in policy and practice in housing for disabled people. So repeatedly we found, repeated mention throughout the survey responses are financial insecurity, restrictive low funding, non-transparent and difficult to locate funding eligibility criteria. So restrictive funding levels, the eligibility criteria disadvantage many disabled people. Even when funding is received, it is frequently inadequate for actual expenses and lacks flexibility. So one survey respondent said, assisted living benefits are ridiculously low and get cut in half if you get a partner. A flexible funding model, i.e. individualised funding supports disabled people and their whānau to exercise choice and control. The Flourishing Together study found respondents who have accessed enabling good lives with navigation support and individualised funding are living in a home that best suits their needs. Support packages should allow flexibility, for example, to enable the pooling of support funds and facilitate the provision of support at various times and for a full range of life experiences. Removing entitlement criteria linked to relationship status. Separating funding for care provision from funding supports for accommodation could provide disabled individuals with greater choice regarding their living arrangements. We found care and housing support packages must be sustainable, otherwise living in a collective setting becomes the only option for many disabled people. Throughout this survey, we received some amazing insights and forward-thinking, proactive solutions around housing design concepts, which brings me to the topic of universal design. Mandatory inclusion of universal design principles in private dwelling building standards. A lack of accessible homes in current planning and building rules affect how and where disabled people and their whānau can live. Some survey respondents spoke about 2 to 3 storied houses with limited space, small living areas, narrow door frames, stairs to upper floors and no lift or garage, intensified builds which also lacked thought for access to community amenities. Places that they cannot access to live in, which greatly limited choice of where disabled people can live. Therefore, a need for a greater increase in universal designed and built houses and the importance of single level housing. The emphasis on housing intensification in cities, most often around public transport hubs, has considerable negative implications for disabled people. The increasingly limited housing options near public transport further limit people's choices about where and how they can live. There is a need to significantly increase the number of accessible homes available for purchase or rent. This will promote greater affordability and ensure that individuals with diverse needs have equal opportunities in the housing system. Lastly, with great emphasis, I'll address the topic of ACC funding and MOH funding. The inequity of housing experiences and outcomes between those who receive ACC funding and those who do not is stark and needs to be urgently addressed. There is significant disparity in people's experiences based on whether the Accident Compensation Corporation, or ACC, covers their disability-related housing needs or not. Those covered by ACC funding receive a greater range of housing solutions, contributing to improved health, well-being and participation outcomes. To address these inequalities, we feel a national inquiry is required to investigate the implications of the current dual funding approach in Aotearoa New Zealand and propose solutions to ensure equitable access to resources and support for everyone, irrespective of the health condition contributing to their disability experience.
Unmute myself. A huge thank you to Christine for so beautifully articulating a range of recommendations. I just want to reassure you that we will be sending out to all registrants a copy of the PowerPoint, and you will see that the main points that Christine talked about, we've got them as main headings through the PowerPoint, and so you'll be able to look at those. But I'll also give, we're also sending out an evidence summary brief with all these materials. We're releasing it today for the first time, and so you'll also get a copy of that, which speaks to what Christine was speaking about there. So we're just going to move on to a couple of last things. Firstly, government agencies, and Maureen is obviously whale riding today, which we're really thrilled that she's a lifetime of wanting to see whales. So I'm just going to make sure I have her video up, and I will now share her video talking about government agencies and particularly her experience of housing modifications.
Kia ora, my name is Maureen Crawford. I'm involved in the Flourishing Together project because I really like the kaupapa. I like that idea of being listened to. And I'm speaking about the housing modification process because after 3 years and 2 months, I have just succeeded in having the house that I live in modified. The results from the survey indicate that I'm not alone in thinking perhaps the process could be a little more streamlined. And that's not only quicker, but having more effective ways of all the agencies involved. So that's, you know, Kāinga Ora, ACC, and the people that contract to them, like the architectural draftspeople, like the builders, like the OTs, communicating between each other effectively and with the goal of meeting the needs and aspirations of disabled people and their whānau in terms of where they live. So that means your measure of success is not reducing carer hours. It's not how in line with an algorithm the result is. It's actually focusing on the individual getting their needs met.
So Maureen, what would have made the largest difference to you, do you think, in terms of getting a good outcome for your housing?
I think so. There were so many people with superb expertise involved that we spent a lot of time canvassing a whole lot of other options when what I've ended up with is exactly what I had where I previously lived. And that works really well for me. And that might have cut a year or two out of the process. And I have to say, I'm an outlier in that I'm really well educated and really articulate. So I've gone through that process and found it beleaguering. So then we get into looking at things like help to navigate through, having ways of knowing very much what your options are. But so oftentimes the only new ingredient in the process is the person with a disability, when this is business as usual for every other person involved in that process.
So it sounds to me like for housing modifications, how agencies work together, how they communicate with the person, how they listen to the person and what they need and what they already know works for them is really important in the process.
Yeah, I believe so. And I guess that means that it's not necessarily going to be more costly, like in my instance. I mean, that's a lot of assessments that happened over those years and various trials of various things. But at the end of the day, it's not ACC that has to live in this house. It's me.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, so great to hear from Maureen, and great that she's coming to the end of that process, as I know other people of our team as well. We've been on a journey together in terms of housing and home within the team as well. Yeah, so I was just briefly going to mention home providers, really briefly to make one point, and we've heard about it a lot already from people, is that housing stability is absolutely key. But at the moment, the only way that disabled people can see to get housing stability is home ownership. And home ownership is increasingly not an option for many New Zealanders. So, what would it look like for us to consider how we can support housing security, housing stability in the rental area? So some of our recommendations are that we need to look at policies and practices that could enhance housing stability of rental properties. So I just wanted to put that one in there briefly. I'm also looking to the side because I'm going to get the next video ready. And where Tony is going to talk about societal attitudes, expectations, and behaviours. And this will be the last video that we have before we move into the discussion. I'm just checking. There's some questions within the in the question and answer, that some that have been answered already, but we're happy to speak to them again. But if you've got anything you'd like us to discuss in the last 10 minutes, then we would be really happy to have that conversation with you. It's a little bit artificial with this. I said before, it's a bit like we're in the interviewing room of the police station and you're all out there looking in on the one-way glass and can't quite see what's going on. But we would really value any interaction that you're able to provide in terms of asking questions. So I'm going to get ready to play Tony's video, which has run away on me. I can't find it. It's somewhere on one of my 3 screens. Maybe if I stop sharing and try again. Here it is. Found it. Okay. So I'll now share that video and yeah.
It's if you're not visible, then you're not seen. If you're not seen, you're not thought of. And I've been lucky enough, I guess, to
Rochelle, you're just sharing your back of your
be
screen.
in a situation where
Sorry, I shall start again. Thank you. That's it.
It's if you're not visible, then you're not seen. If you're not seen, you're not thought of. And I've been lucky enough, I guess, to be in a situation where I've, despite my best efforts, have been forced to be seen. And through being seen, it has given me a chance to be heard. Doesn't always translate to something positive being done, but at least I have had the chance to have had my voice heard. Society hasn't always wanted to hear from people with disabilities, especially in regard to housing. It seems that society for a long time was quite happy with disabled people being funneled away, quietly hidden. Therefore their needs were met. Don't need to worry about them. But as we've recently seen through the news media, that hasn't led to good things, which has enabled a person, I guess, like myself, to embrace the recent attitudes of government, which is about people with impairments being able to live within the community, and I say be able to live, it's more around the expectation that they should live within the community. And I've tried to lived within the community my whole life. It's not been easy. It all started out with living in a car, which led to a caravan, which led to a state home. And the state home gave me my first sense of stability. But it comes with rules, it comes with expectations, and it comes with a sort of an unwritten rule that if you don't behave, you could be removed. So for me, it was about removing myself from that vulnerability of that societal expectation of being seen to behave, I guess, or to conform. Because every disabled person I met in my life journey, it's all been about trying to break out from the need to conform to societal expectation. So by living in the community, I'm visible. By having a home within the community, I feel I belong. And by being active and working in the community, or being active and involved in local events, or being active and engaged with community service and life, I feel that I have helped to try, I guess, and encourage visibility within the community for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the whole process with this project, and hearing the different voices, being guided along the ways of with you guys, where you encourage us to voice, and that's, to me, is part of the bit that's lacking within society, that encouragement to share the voice, to actually just speak up, speak out, and to call. But you're quite right, and yes, not a lot had changed.
Yeah.
Which really, it's really disheartening. I'm a third generation of 4 within my family to have my disability passed down. And I think back to where, like my father came from, to where I am today. And I know that I had some different choices, but it was purely because I was employed, engaged, and offered opportunities where I could contribute and have a voice. And to me, that has been the biggest difference, is to have that voice.
So I thought that Tony's korero with Rachel was a great way to end, because what I have been privileged to see throughout this project is this this desire for disabled people to continually put themselves out there, make themselves visible, to change societal's attitudes, expectations, and behaviours, but how burdensome that is. And Maureen used the word beleaguered. I felt beleaguered, and it's not uncommon for people to say in their responses how tiring and exhausting it is. And so simple things that we can do, all of us can do, to listen well, and to listen to what disabled people and their families are saying, rather than what we expect them to say, would be a really, really good start in that process. So as we come towards the end of this session, we've got 2 things left: a period for discussion, and then we've got a period for resources. I'm actually just thinking I might swap it around, so I talk about the resources quickly so that people are aware of what the resources are that they can access, and where they can get more information. And then we've got time for discussion, and that means that I'm not going to cut people off before I need to. So our challenge to you is to think about what can you do to control or influence the disability housing system. Which section are you in? Which grouping are you in? And what are the things that you might be able to do to create change? Part of it is about this. This isn't about a burdensome responsibility, but this is an empowered, mana enhancing place of a stance to start. There is something that we can do. It might be very small, but it is something. So we're developing some resources to help with that. The first thing that we've developed is the Flourishing Together website. This, for the next year or so anyway, will be our receptacle where we keep all of the materials that we develop. This is just a screenshot of it, but I've showed that if you hover over what we found, you can see housing findings and including disabled voices and policy findings there. At the moment, there's not heaps there because lots of what we've been doing is oral presentations. And so we'll be adding to those. If you want to see where we've been sharing findings and oral presentations, you can click on the share findings list and you can see all the different groups that we've talked to. So all things Flourishing Together, the website is where you would go to. Also, just to let you know that because as part of this registration, we have your email, and so we're thinking that we will just, not all the time, we don't want to bombard you, but occasionally if we have something major come out, we would email you and just let you know, just to let you know this report is finished or something like that, or this has been published, so that you're kept informed. The first thing that has come out is a visual report of the survey. This is about a 24-page document, I think. It's on the website. You can also request a copy and we'd send that to you. That's not an issue. Along with the visual PDF, we've also got a Word text document and a video of me talking through how the survey report is structured. And it's just a summary of what we heard, some of the themes. So if you're looking for quotes, summary ideas of what people, the 134 people that contributed data to the survey is about, that's a really good place to start. Alongside that, we're going to develop some advocacy prompt templates. Now, lately we've been doing lots of submissions to Te Tiriti bills and regulation standards and all sorts of things. And I don't know about you, but it's been quite a tricky process and you're not quite sure where to start. And it's really helpful when there's something to then frame around. So the recommendations that have already been developed from this research, we're going to frame them up into like prompt templates depending on who you're advocating to. So if you're going to your local councillor, for instance, here's a local councillor prompt template that you can adapt to bring your own experiences in and to highlight the recommendations. Or if you're wanting to go to your MP, or if you're wanting to go and talk to the local developer that's building on the corner, then you're going to have some relevant information. So those are in the process of being developed. The other thing is we'll record some short video summaries of the key recommendations as well with captions so that they're available around. So that's just some other ideas, but there are more than that. As I mentioned, this policy evidence summary is released today. In fact, you'll be the first to see it. So we will send that out with the recording and the PDF from this, but you can also go onto the website. There is a copy uploaded already in the website, and you're welcome. It's about 7 pages, I think, outlining the main things that we've talked about today in terms of the big themes that have come out that we think need to be reconsidered or questioned within New Zealand policy and practice related to disability housing. But alongside that, we will develop a full report which goes more bullet point by bullet point through recommendations. But rather than leaving them just stark bullet point, we want to bring in people's stories and people's expertise, so it sits alongside and adds a bit of colour and nuance to the recommendations. So that's my next big report job to work on, along with publication. So there will be peer review publications. We're at submission point for the initial survey publication, and we will also be writing another about how the survey worked in terms of allowing people to share ideas. We'll have some around the co-produced literature review and also the whole research process as a whole. There's a number of conference presentations, like I mentioned, and if I do a presentation in oral, I'll do a recording afterwards, so that people can see what I shared, and that will be made available on the website as well. So heaps of different ways of accessing information, but we all know that sometimes a good old oral talk is helpful, and certainly I'm really happy for people to approach us if you know of an organisation, especially within one of the disability housing system groupings, that you think would be interested in this work. Policy advisors, local council, planners, architects, builders, whatever, MSD, ACC, you name it. We're happy to come and chat. You'll be pleased to know that Whaikaha has already taken any results that we've got so far, and they've been included in the disability strategy refresh that's currently underway, and the housing group has access to them. So that's really fantastic. We'll also look at doing some media and social media outputs over the next wee while. I'm going to come back to that. There is some further information in terms of the website, my email, phone number, and just on acknowledging HRC, who funded this work, and Otago, who hosted the research in my role as emerging researcher, which is what the funding was. So I'm going to go back now for us just to have some opportunities to think about some of the discussion points, and also maybe while we're doing that, you might want to think about one thing that you could do to control or influence the housing system. We've got about 5 minutes. I'll stop share. I wasn't sharing, was I? Was I not sharing any of that?
Not the website.
Oh, nothing.
Sorry.
Nothing.
Sorry, I assumed. Didn't say.
Okay.
A number of people in the question and answer have asked me about the website, and I have put the link to the website.
Brilliant.
I
Sorry.
could share it all in the chat, but I'm just aware of time, and there's a few questions.
Yeah, okay. What I'll do is you'll see on the PowerPoint that's coming through that there is links, etc., to what I've just been talking about and sailing on through without having shared my screen. So I do apologise for that. So yeah, just there are what are some activities that people can do to support more accessible housing being provided. So I guess this is what we're sort of saying, Gabby, is that identify, rather than being overwhelmed by the massiveness of it all, identify one kind of aspect of this housing system, one group that could potentially you could connect with, either do advocacy or relationship building in terms of what are the issues that you encounter. For instance, my experience is builders really want to do the right thing, but they're often just not aware. So what would it be like if we built relationships with master builder organisations or developer organisations to say, hey, we would love to come and share stories and tell you about some of the implications, some of the simple things that could be done that would make a significant difference. So what I guess I'm encouraging, we're all encouraging people to do is identify areas where you might be able to either build relationships or advocate, or and then advocate, ask for change, keep telling the story, keep being visible, keep speaking up, and keep bringing people's experience and expertise through. Pratika, you've made a comment, just a comment, recognising the diverse needs of our differently abled community is essential. Referring agencies must understand these needs and actively participate in co-designed centralised support services. These services should focus on wraparound care and be driven by the specific needs of individuals, ensuring accessibility and person-centred design. We couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely, totally agree. That the way things are done, how people feel within the processes, completely has a huge impact on their experience of choice and control. Our experience from listening to people's survey experiences is where they shared in the survey was that even if they didn't get the outcome that they ideally wanted, if they felt listened to in the process, that made a huge difference, or they were told the reasons why. There was a lot of, people felt there was a lot of gatekeeping going on, that people weren't able to know what was available and therefore have a real choice in terms of what the options were. So those co-designed processes and wraparound care navigation is really important. Gagan, you've talked about what evidence is available to support the use of universal design and housing in the built environment. There is so much work in this space. LifeMark probably are leading within New Zealand and have spent a lot of time and resources advocating for this. And then at an international level, there's certainly significant research that we reviewed that looked at the use of universal design or the application of universal design and how and the impact of policy. But really what it does take is a mindset change, once again, within our society that we shouldn't build for just a very narrow aspect of a person's life, that we need to be thinking about whole of life, and we need to be thinking about the range of people who will be living in a home, and financial gain is not the sole decider on what a home or a house should look like. If anyone on the panel wants to jump in and comment, please do, because you're all more expert than me on that one.
I'd add something quickly to that
Yeah,
last question. In terms of evidence, if you're talking about evidence that is other than it's morally and ethically the right thing to do, if you were looking for evidence more, at the moment there isn't a huge amount of evidence in terms of, you know, houses with universal design features will sell for more or things like so. If there's a lot of evidence that it's good from a societal point of view at the moment, what needs to still be done in the research area in this is actually proving that it's also good from an economic standpoint as well. There was a long time ago, some research done by brands that looked at the cost of implementing universal design at the point of build versus the point later down the road. And it's like 1% of the bit cost at the time of build and like 15% at the time if you do it later. But again, it's like 15 years old, so it's really out of date and it hasn't been redone. So it is an area that needs some more, not that I don't think that our lovely emotional, like social goodness things aren't important, but if we want to be influencing it at a policy level, which is often who's going to make money out of this, at the moment that still needs to be done.
And the other thing that requires work is society attitudes, like you were talking about before, that actually people with disability aren't problems to be solved, that they're actually people who contribute a huge amount to society in lots of different ways, and we're not problems. And once we get over that hump, it solves so many of the barriers, because suddenly we're not a problem to be solved, we're somebody to be celebrated like everyone else should be. So
Kate, what a fabulous way to finish. Absolutely beautiful summing up. I I've now shared the screen this time, and so you will see, I'm not going to talk through them again, but you will see there's the link to the website. There's some information about the visual report and other ideas, and there's the policy evidence summary and some other documents that are being prepared, and get in touch. And what Kate was talking about, we also asked people in the survey about what do you hope for, and people hoped for all sorts of things, all the things we all hope for. And so I won't read through those, but universal standards for building, an incentive for landlords to provide accessible homes, a large whare with many rooms so whānau can come and go, being able to buy my own home. People talked about intentional communities. The main thing is tenure, that a person knows that it's their permanent home. So all of those ideas certainly came through in what people hoped for. It's been such a pleasure having you here. We're so grateful. We know that this is a drop in the ocean, but most of all, I want to thank members of the co-production team that have shared their experiences and expertise today and throughout the project. As you can hear, this project would not have been possible without them. It's their expertise that have driven it, and the research team have just provided a bit of momentum along the way. Kirsten is going to finish again with the karakia. Now, this karakia has been used by the project throughout, and it's very precious to us. So thank you, Kirsten, and thank you, everyone. Don't hesitate to get in touch.
Kia ora, Rochelle. Me karakia tātou. Tihei mauri ora, ko Aotearoa tōku kāinga tūturu, ko tōna whakapiripiri tōku kāinga. Ko te ahuri mō wai tōku kāinga, e hara tāku i te whare rahi, e hara tāku i te whare whairawa. Ko ona whakarākei, ko ona whakaniko. Ko te aroha, ko te whakapono me te rangi Māori he kāinga whakatō kākono. Hei whakatipu i ngā tōtara haimata, hei whakatipu i ngā reianga rangatira, hara mai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tāe ki e. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora.